Elias Ward had always believed he understood the desert. He had crossed it many times in his life, riding between lonely ranches that sat miles apart like tiny islands in an endless sea of sand. He had seen storms, long dry weeks, and roads so empty that even a wandering coyote felt like company. Because of this, Elias carried a quiet confidence, the sort that made him think nothing in the desert could surprise him anymore. But on this particular morning, that confidence slowly turned into a mistake he would soon regret. He left the small trading post just after sunrise, carrying supplies for a ranching family who lived far beyond the normal travel routes. His horse, a steady brown mare named Hazel, moved calmly across the warm sand as the cool morning air brushed against Elias's face. He checked his map, his canteen, and his saddlebags, making sure everything was secure. It all looked fine. The sky seemed clear, and he felt strong enough to make the long journey without stopping for the night. As the morning hours passed, the heat began rising faster than he expected. The desert sun was harsh that day, brighter and heavier than usual. Elias noticed the shimmer of heat waves moving across the horizon, like ghosts dancing above the sand. He narrowed his eyes at them but kept riding, telling himself it was normal. He had seen heat like this before. Still, a small warning tugged at him. Something felt off, but he ignored it, choosing to trust his experience. Around midday, the wind began to pick up. Hazel lifted her head and snorted nervously, sensing a change. Elias looked behind him and saw a faint brown blur rising into the sky, growing larger and darker by the minute. A sandstorm. He frowned and urged Hazel forward, hoping to outrun it. He had escaped storms before. He believed he could do it again, but this one was different. The wind grew stronger with each breath he took. Sand started swirling around his boots, then his legs, then rising higher until it whipped at his face. The sound grew loud, like thousands of tiny stones hitting metal. Hazel panicked, stumbling and swinging her head from side to side. Elias tried to calm her, but the wind pushed hard against both of them. The whole world began to blur into a cloud of dust. Within minutes, Elias could no longer see the horizon. He could no longer see the sun. Everything turned into a spinning wall of sand. He pulled his bandana over his mouth, lowered his head, and tried to guide Hazel toward what he hoped was the right direction. But the storm grew stronger than his voice, stronger than any pull on the reins. Hazel cried out and bolted sideways, blinded by the sand. Elias lost control. He held on as tightly as he could, but the sandstorm swallowed them completely. He could barely open his eyes. He felt the horse jerk, turn, try to climb something, and then stumble again. The world became nothing but noise, sand, and confusion. He didn't know how long he rode like this, maybe minutes, maybe an hour. Time didn't feel real inside the storm. Then, all at once, Hazel slipped. Elias hit the ground hard. Sand filled his ears. He tried to get up, but the storm forced him down again. He crawled blindly toward where he thought Hazel had fallen, but he couldn't find her. The sound of her hooves faded somewhere in the storm, swallowed by the wind. He shouted her name, but his voice disappeared in seconds. Now he was alone. When the storm finally weakened, Elias was lying half-covered in sand. His eyes burned. His throat felt like hot dust. He sat up slowly, coughing, trying to catch his breath. The desert around him looked nothing like the path he had been following. The storm had changed everything. Landmarks were covered. Tracks were gone. His horse was nowhere to be seen. He brushed the sand off his clothes and reached for his canteen, hoping for water to calm his throat. But when he uncapped it, only a few drops fell out. He closed his eyes in frustration. That storm had cost him more than his direction. It had cost him his most important lifeline. Still, he refused to panic. Elias stood up, scanned the horizon, and began walking. He told himself he would find his horse, or at least find shade. He walked for what felt like hours under the brutal sun. His legs shook, His lips cracked. Sweat dried instantly on his skin. Each breath grew heavier. He checked his pockets again, hoping he had forgotten a small flask or anything useful. But there was nothing. The sun moved above him like a burning eye. As the afternoon grew hotter, Elias's strength faded faster. He tried to think clearly, repeating small plans inside his head. Keep moving. Find shelter. Don't stop. But thinking became harder. His body felt slow, heavy, almost separate from his mind. He stumbled on small rocks he normally would have avoided. He walked in zigzags without realizing it. His vision began to blur. The desert started to look like many deserts layered on top of each other. The sand shifted. The wind whispered things that weren't there. He thought he saw Hazel again, just a flash of brown in the distance, but when he blinked, the shape disappeared. Thirst now became his biggest enemy. His mouth felt sticky, dry, almost painful. He tried to swallow but couldn't. His tongue felt like sandpaper. His heartbeat slowed, yet his head pounded. He took a deep breath, then another, but even breathing hurt. At some point, he dropped one of the supply bags. He didn't even realize it until he turned around and saw its faint trail in the sand. He stood there staring at it, too tired to walk back and pick it up. That was when he understood how bad his condition had become. If he couldn't pick up a small bag, how would he survive? Still, he pushed himself forward, step by step, breath by breath. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. He couldn't tell. The desert sky turned orange as the sun began to drop. Normally, sunset brought relief, but now the cooling air only made his body shake. His legs finally gave out. He fell to his knees first, gasping, trying desperately to stay upright. He tried to tell himself, just one more step. But his body no longer listened. His hands touched the sand, warm on top but cold beneath the surface. His eyes drooped. His thoughts faded. As he collapsed fully onto the desert floor, he knew he was close to death. He felt strangely calm, as if his body understood something he didn't. He thought about Hazel. He thought about the ranchers waiting for supplies. He thought about his small cabin far away, empty and silent. The sky above him blurred into shapes. Maybe clouds, maybe stars, maybe nothing. Then, just before his mind slipped into darkness, he heard something. A voice. Soft, distant, gentle. For a moment he thought it was the wind. Then he felt something cool touch the corner of his lips. Water. A drop at first, then another. He forced his eyes open, though it took all the strength he had left. And through the haze, through the fading light, he saw the outline of a woman kneeling beside him. Her face was half-shadowed by the setting sun. Her expression was full of worry. She held a small clay cup in one hand and leaned over him, carefully pouring water onto his dry lips. Elias tried to speak, but his voice refused to come out. All he could do was stare weakly. Wondering if she was real or some kind of desert vision sent to comfort him in his final moments. But she was real. He could feel her hand on his cheek, cool and steady, as she whispered something he couldn't fully understand. The sound was soft, but the meaning was clear. She wanted him to stay awake. She wanted him to live. Elias tried to lift his hand, but it barely moved. The woman noticed and gently took his wrist, lowering it with care, as if telling him to save his strength. The desert around him grew dimmer. The sky grew darker, but the woman's presence stayed bright in his fading sight, her voice the only anchor keeping him from slipping away. Then everything went black, and he surrendered to the darkness, not with fear, but with the strange comfort of knowing someone had found him. Someone had cared enough to try to save him. Elias drifted in and out of consciousness through the night. His mind floated between dreams and reality, hearing faint sounds but unable to understand them. Sometimes he heard water dripping. Sometimes he heard a woman's voice murmuring softly. Sometimes he felt something cool on his forehead. Everything blurred together like pieces of a puzzle he was too weak to solve. When morning light touched his eyes, he finally opened them fully. The first thing he saw was a wooden ceiling made of old beams. Sunlight filtered through a small window, casting warm shapes across the room. He blinked slowly, confused, before realizing he was lying on a bed covered with a handmade blanket. He tried to sit up, but his body protested. His throat ached, his lips felt cracked, and his whole body felt heavy, as if he had borrowed someone else's weight. Before he could try again, he heard footsteps approach from the doorway. The woman from the desert stepped inside. She was carrying a small clay bowl, steam rising from it. Her dark hair was tied loosely behind her head, and her clothes were simple, the kind worn by people who worked hard every day. Her face showed a mix of worry and relief when she saw him awake. "You're up," she said softly, her voice warm but careful. "Don't move too fast. You're still weak." Elias swallowed, but his throat was so dry that the simple motion hurt. The woman noticed immediately and walked closer, pulling a chair beside the bed. She dipped a wooden spoon into the bowl and blew on it lightly before holding it near his lips. "Just a little," she whispered. "It's warm broth. It will help you." Elias opened his mouth slowly and let the liquid fall onto his tongue. It tasted simple but comforting, and the warmth spread gently through his body. He closed his eyes as he swallowed, feeling a wave of relief. That single sip felt like the first real moment of safety since the storm. The woman fed him a few more spoonfuls, watching carefully to make sure he didn't choke. When she saw his strength fading again, she stopped. "That's enough for now," she said, setting the bowl aside. "You need rest." Elias tried to speak, but only a small whisper escaped. "Where am I?" "You're in my family's home," she replied. "We live near the edge of the desert. My father built this place many years ago." He nodded weakly. He wanted to ask who she was, how she found him, what happened to Hazel, but his voice refused to cooperate. The woman stood and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "My name is Maria," she added softly. "Maria Delgado. You were very sick when I found you. I wasn't sure you would wake up." Elias listened, grateful but overwhelmed. He tried to thank her, but the words dissolved on his tongue. Maria smiled kindly. "You can talk later. Rest now." She stepped out of the room, leaving the door slightly open. Elias listened to faint voices from another part of the house. Maria speaking gently to someone older, then footsteps, then the sound of a kettle heating over a fire. He closed his eyes, letting his body sink deeper into the bed, comforted by the sounds of a home that wasn't his, but felt strangely safe. When he woke again, the sun was higher. He sensed someone sitting near him, and when he opened his eyes, he saw an older man with gray hair and a weathered face. The man nodded at him respectfully. "I'm Diego Delgado," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Maria told me you woke earlier. She's been looking after you since last night. You owe your life to her." Elias tried again to speak. His voice cracked, but finally formed a word. "Thank you." Diego's stern expression softened. "Save your strength. You've been through a rough time." He glanced toward the window. "Sandstorms like that one don't forgive easily. You're lucky someone found you." Elias looked at the older man's steady eyes and nodded slightly. Diego placed a hand on the edge of the bed. "You can stay here until you recover. There's no need to rush. Maria insists on caring for you, and when she decides something..." He chuckled softly. "Well, we all listen." Diego stood and left the room just as Maria entered again with another cup of water. She smiled gently at Elias, noticing that his eyes looked clearer, less clouded with pain. "You're doing better," she said. offering him the cup. "Can you drink on your own?" He reached weakly for it, his hand trembling. Maria steadied his fingers, guiding the cup to his lips. Cool water touched his mouth, easing the dryness. He drank slowly, grateful for every drop. When he finished, Maria took the cup and placed it on the small table near his bed. She pulled a stool close and sat beside him. "You were close to death," she said quietly, looking at her hands. "I was searching for one of our goats yesterday. It ran too far. That's how I found you in the sand." Elias tried to imagine the scene, him lying half-buried, barely breathing, while a stranger knelt beside him. He felt a shiver of disbelief. He had survived storms before, but never one like that. Maria continued, "I thought at first you were already gone. You weren't moving. But when I touched your face, you opened your eyes just a little. That was enough for me to bring you water." He listened with full attention. Her voice was calm, but carried a quiet emotion beneath it, something like worry mixed with relief. "I brought you home on our cart," she added, "but you kept fainting. We spent hours cooling your body and giving you water just a little at a time." Elias looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. He wished he had words strong enough to show his gratitude, but all he managed was a slow nod. Maria noticed his effort and smiled gently. "You don't need to speak right now. Rest is more important." Throughout the day, she checked on him several times. She brought him fresh water, changed the cloth on his forehead, and helped him sip more broth. She never stayed too long, giving him space, but always returned before he felt alone again. As the sun began to set, Elias felt strong enough to speak a little more. "You saved me," he whispered. Maria paused, then slowly nodded. "Anyone would have helped you." Elias shook his head gently. "Not anyone." She lowered her gaze, her cheeks warming slightly. "You were alone. I couldn't leave you there." He watched her as she stood to leave, her steps quiet, almost graceful. She moved with a gentleness that eased the room around her. He wondered how someone like her ended up living so far away from town, near the harsh desert. That night, he slept more peacefully than before. His fever decreased, and his body regained a bit of strength. He woke once to see Maria adjusting the blanket over him, making sure he wasn't cold. She moved silently, but when she noticed his eyes open, she whispered, "Go back to sleep. You're safe." The next morning, Elias managed to sit up slowly with Maria's help. She placed pillows behind him to support his back. The room's warm glow felt comforting, and he noticed small details: the handmade pottery, the simple wooden furniture, the worn rug on the floor. This house had seen many years of hard work and love. Maria brought him a bowl of oatmeal. "This will give you strength," she said. She fed him patiently when his hands trembled too much. Elias felt embarrassed, but Maria never made him feel small. She simply smiled and encouraged him gently. Over time, Elias began asking small questions. "What about my horse?" Maria shook her head sadly. "We didn't see her. The storm might have scattered everything. Maybe she ran to shelter. We can look for her together when you're well." Her words brought a little hope into his heart. Later that afternoon, Maria's younger brother, Mateo, peeked into the room, curious about the stranger they had rescued. He was a lively boy with bright eyes. He whispered loudly, "Is he awake?" Maria laughed softly and waved him in. Mateo stepped closer to Elias's bed. "You look like a real cowboy," the boy said proudly. "Do you have a gun?" Maria quickly scolded him. "Mateo, don't bother him. He needs rest." But Elias smiled weakly. "I did. Lost it in the storm." Mateo's eyes widened with awe, and he ran off to tell their parents. Elias chuckled faintly, surprised he even had the energy to laugh. Hours passed, and each moment made him feel more alive. That evening, Maria sat beside him again, placing fresh bandages on his sunburned hands. She worked carefully, her touch gentle but steady. Elias watched her, grateful for her kindness, and tried to speak again. "Why help a stranger so much?" he asked in a soft whisper. Maria paused, thinking. "Because someone saved my father once," she replied quietly. "Years ago, a traveler helped him when he was hurt. We never forgot it. So now, when we see someone in need, we do the same." Elias listened, moved by her words. She didn't look for reward or praise. She simply believed in doing what was right. Before leaving the room for the night, Maria paused in the doorway and looked back at him with gentle eyes. "Rest well. Tomorrow you'll feel stronger," she said softly. Elias watched her silhouette fade into the dim hallway. As he lay back, warmth spread through him, not from the blanket, but from knowing someone cared enough to save him, tend to him, and speak to him with such quiet kindness. For the first time since the storm, Elias felt truly alive, and for the first time in a long while, he wondered what it might mean to know someone like Maria beyond just the kindness of being rescued. He closed his eyes, letting sleep take him again, comforted by the thought that he was safe, and not alone. The next days passed slowly but peacefully for Elias, and each morning he woke feeling a little stronger than before. The desert storm had nearly taken his life, but this quiet house and the gentle care of Maria and her family brought him back step by step. Every day felt like a small victory. He could sit longer, speak clearer, and even walk a few steps with support. Maria noticed every change. She always arrived with fresh water before he even asked, made sure he ate enough, and reminded him to rest when he tried to push his limits too fast. Elias felt grateful in ways he struggled to express. He wasn't used to being taken care of. Life as a cowboy had taught him to rely on himself, to solve his own problems, to stay strong no matter what. But here, in this warm adobe home, he learned something different. Kindness was its own strength. On the 5th morning after the storm, Elias finally managed to stand on his own and walk to the doorway. The sunlight outside touched his skin gently, not as a threat, but as a reminder of what he had survived. He breathed in the dry desert air and felt a mix of fear and gratitude. If Maria had arrived even a little later, he would not be standing there now. Maria noticed him standing in the doorway and hurried toward him. "You shouldn't be outside yet," she said gently but firmly. "Your strength is still thin." Elias smiled weakly. "Just needed fresh air." She walked closer and positioned herself beside him to support him if he swayed. "At least lean on the wall," she insisted. "I don't want you falling again." Elias chuckled softly. "Yes, ma'am." Her face warmed slightly at his playful tone, but she didn't back down. She stayed close until she felt confident he was steady. Later, as he slowly made his way back inside, Maria's father, Diego, joined him at the table. The older man studied Elias with the calm eyes of someone who understood hardship. "You're improving," Diego said. "That's good. You'll need strength if you plan to travel back to town." Elias nodded. "I don't want to stay a burden." "You're no burden," Diego replied firmly. "You were a man dying in the sand. Helping you was the right thing." Maria, who had been cleaning vegetables by the stove, listened quietly. She kept her eyes on her work, but her ears caught every word. Elias took a deep breath. "When I'm fully strong, I'll help around the house, even small things, whatever I can." Diego smiled. "We won't refuse help." And so, the next day, Elias began doing small tasks. At first, he helped sweep the floor, though Maria insisted he should sit if he felt dizzy. Then he carried water jugs from the kitchen to the small garden behind the house. He moved slowly, but every step reminded him he was alive. Mateo, Maria's younger brother, followed him everywhere. The boy admired him endlessly and asked questions almost non-stop. Did the storm feel like a giant? Did you see scorpions? Can you teach me how to ride a horse? Elias answered what he could, stopping to rest when he had to, and each answer made Mateo grin proudly. One afternoon, Elias and Maria found themselves alone outside while Mateo chased a chicken and Diego repaired a goat pen. Maria stood beside a large clay pot, filling buckets with water from the well. Her sleeves were rolled up and her hair was tied neatly. Elias stepped forward to help. "I can lift that," he said. "You shouldn't," she replied. "It's too heavy. I need to build strength again." Maria looked unsure, but eventually stepped aside. Elias lifted the bucket slowly, his arms trembling slightly. He carried it carefully to the garden, placed it down, and exhaled. Maria walked behind him just in case he lost balance. "You're improving," she said quietly. "Thanks to you," he replied. She lowered her gaze. "Anyone in my place would have done the same." "No," Elias said softly. "Not everyone." Maria froze for a moment, as if his words reached a part of her she rarely allowed others to touch. She turned away to hide her expression, pretending to check the plants. Over the next week, Elias grew strong enough to help Diego with chores outside. They repaired the fence together, replaced old wood, and cleared fallen branches. Elias moved slower than Diego, but his determination impressed the older man. During breaks, they sat under the shade of a large mesquite tree. Diego often spoke of his family's life, how they built their home brick by brick, how he raised his children, how they survived in a place where every day was a test. "Maria is a good woman," Diego said once, sipping water from a tin cup. "She works hard. She has a strong heart." Elias nodded, listening carefully. "But," Diego continued, "she carries the weight of many things. Her mother passed long ago. Maria stepped into her place to keep us together. She doesn't complain, but I can see how tired she is sometimes." Elias knew Diego wasn't just sharing information. He was giving Elias a glimpse into the heart of the woman who had saved him. Elias looked toward the house, imagining Maria inside, preparing a meal or helping Mateo with chores, her face calm, but always carrying quiet strength. That evening, Elias helped Maria wash the dishes. He stood beside her, handing her bowls one by one. She scrubbed them with gentle motions, her sleeves wet, a few strands of hair falling over her face. The moment felt peaceful, almost like something that belonged to a family rather than a stranger passing through. "Why do you help so much?" she asked suddenly, not looking at him. "Because you saved my life," he replied. "And because I want to." She hesitated, then said softly, "You don't owe me anything." "I know. That's why it means something." Maria paused, her hands still in the water. Slowly, she lifted her eyes and met his. For a brief moment, something unspoken passed between them. Something warm. Something hopeful. Something fragile. But she quickly looked away, placing the washed bowl aside. Elias didn't push further. He respected the quiet boundaries she kept, even as he felt a growing connection he couldn't deny. The next morning, the sky glowed with soft orange light, and the desert breeze brushed across the yard. Diego suggested searching for Elias's horse, Hazel. Elias felt anxious but hopeful. Hazel had been his companion for years. Losing her felt like losing a part of his soul. Maria joined the search. She walked beside Elias, guiding him through the desert paths she knew well. They called Hazel's name, looked for prints, and scanned the horizon for any sign of movement. The desert stretched far and quiet, the silence broken only by their footsteps. After almost an hour, they spotted something, a set of hoof prints half covered in sand. "These look fresh," Maria said, kneeling to touch the ground. Maybe she survived the storm. Elias felt a spark of hope. They followed the tracks carefully. The desert sun climbed higher, but Maria kept a steady pace. She knew the land, the paths, and the danger of pushing too hard. At last, near a cluster of rocks, they saw Hazel standing under a small patch of shade, her brown coat dusty, but her body unharmed. Elias let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He approached Hazel slowly, speaking softly. "Easy, girl. I'm here." Hazel lifted her head, ears twitching, and stepped toward him. She rubbed her nose gently against his arm, and Elias felt a rush of relief. Maria smiled quietly, watching the reunion. Elias turned to her, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you. I wouldn't have found her without you." Maria shook her head. "You would have found her. You don't give up easily." He laughed softly. "Maybe, but I'm still grateful." They led Hazel home together. The walk back felt easier than the walk there. The sun didn't feel as harsh, the sand didn't feel as threatening, and the distance didn't feel as long. With Hazel beside him and Maria walking quietly at his side, Elias felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. That evening, as they all sat outside sharing a simple dinner, Mateo talked excitedly about how brave Hazel must have been. Diego nodded proudly toward Elias, acknowledging his strength. But Elias's gaze kept drifting to Maria. Every time their eyes met, they looked away shyly, but something warm lingered between them. In the soft glow of sunset, Elias realized something important. This place, this family, this woman, had touched his heart in a way he never expected. He came close to dying in the desert, yet here he was, alive, recovering, and finding comfort he didn't know he needed. He lay awake that night longer than usual, listening to the quiet sounds of the small house. The desert wind whispered outside, gentle and calm. Something inside him whispered too, an understanding forming slowly, quietly. He wasn't just healing his body here, he was healing something deeper, and he knew that whatever happened next, Maria had become a part of his story in a way he could never forget. Elias woke on the morning of his 12th day at the Delgado's home, with a strange heaviness in his chest, not from sickness, but from knowing his time there was almost over. His strength had returned. He could walk without help, lift tools without shaking, and even help Diego with bigger chores. Every sign pointed to one truth. He was ready to leave, but instead of feeling proud, he felt a quiet ache. The thought of leaving this home, this peaceful routine, and especially leaving Maria stirred something inside him that he didn't know how to name. The desert had nearly killed him, yet now it felt like he was walking out of the safest place he had known in years. After breakfast, he stepped outside, watching the warm sunlight stretch over the sand. Hazel grazed near the fence, healthy and calm. Mateo played with a stick in the yard, pretending it was a sword. Diego sharpened tools under the shade. Everything looked simple, quiet, and strangely perfect. Then Maria stepped out of the house. She carried a basket filled with folded blankets. When she saw Elias, she paused for a moment. Her eyes softened, but her smile did not come as easily as before. She knew, too. She sensed his departure as clearly as he did. "You're feeling strong today?" she said, keeping her voice steady. Elias nodded. "Stronger than I've felt in a long time." "I'm glad," she replied quietly. There was a small pause, filled with words neither of them gathered the courage to say. Finally, Maria looked down at the basket. "I washed your coat. It's dry now." He walked over to her slowly and took the coat from the basket. It felt strange, heavy with dust, but clean from her care. Holding it reminded him of the storm, but being near her reminded him of survival, warmth, and something else he didn't fully understand. "Thank you for everything," he said softly. Maria nodded and looked away before her emotions showed too clearly. "Everyone deserves help when they're in danger." "You gave me more than help," he said. Her hands froze on the blanket she was folding. She didn't respond, but he saw her shoulders tense just slightly. For a moment he wondered if he should stop talking, but the truth inside him was too strong to ignore. Diego approached them before Elias could speak again. "If you're planning to travel," the older man said kindly, "you should leave before the afternoon heat." "Yes," Elias replied, though the word felt heavy. "You're welcome to return any time," Diego added. "Our home will always have water, food, and rest for you." Elias nodded, grateful. "Your kindness saved my life." Diego placed a strong hand on Elias's shoulder. "Sometimes life brings strangers to our door for a reason. You were meant to survive. Maria believed that from the start." Maria slowly lifted her gaze, hearing her father speak. Elias saw the warmth in her eyes, mixed with sadness she tried hard to hide. After preparing Hazel and packing the remaining supplies he had, Elias stood ready to leave. Maria handed him a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. "It's food," she said. "Bread and dried fruit, enough for the journey." "You didn't have to?" "I wanted to," she interrupted. Their eyes met again. This time neither looked away quickly. Elias cleared his throat. "Maria, I don't want to leave without saying something important." Her fingers tightened around the bundle she still held between them. "What is it?" He took a slow breath. "The desert almost took my life. I thought everything was over that day. But then you brought me back. You saved me not only from dying, but from feeling alone in the world." Maria's lips parted slightly, surprised by the softness in his voice. He continued, "I've spent years riding from place to place, delivering supplies, sleeping under the stars, eating by fires, always alone. I never thought I'd find a place that made me feel something different." Maria's heartbeat quickened. "I don't want to disappear from your life," he said gently. "If you'd allow me, I'd like to come back. Not as someone needing help, but as someone who wants to know you better." Maria lowered her gaze, her cheeks warming. She didn't speak for a long moment, and Elias feared he had said too much. But when she finally looked up again, her eyes glowed with a soft emotion she had been holding back for days. "You can come back," she whispered, "if you want to." Elias felt something settle inside him, a steady warmth replacing all the uncertainty. Diego cleared his throat politely, reminding them that he was still standing nearby. Elias stepped back respectfully and swung his saddle onto Hazel. He mounted slowly, feeling the weight of the moment pressing against his heart. Mateo ran up to him, waving excitedly. "Come back soon. I want you to teach me how to ride." Elias laughed softly. "I'll teach you next time." With everything ready, Elias took one last look at the small adobe house, the yard, the people who had saved him, and the woman whose presence had changed something deep inside him. He tipped his hat to them. "Thank you, truly." Maria stepped forward impulsively. "Be careful in the desert," she said. "The heat is strong this time of year." "I will," he promised. "And don't forget us," she added, her voice quieter. "I couldn't forget you even if I tried." For a moment, Maria held his gaze as if memorizing his face. Then she slowly stepped back, giving him space to leave. Elias clicked his tongue softly, and Hazel began walking forward. The sound of footsteps on sand felt different this time, heavier, slower, filled with emotions he wasn't used to carrying. He didn't look back immediately. He rode forward until he reached a small rise in the desert. Only then did he turn. Maria still stood by the doorway, watching him. The wind lifted a few strands of her hair, and the evening sun painted a warm glow across her face. She didn't wave, but her eyes held a promise, one stronger than any spoken word. Elias raised his hand in a small, silent farewell. Maria nodded slowly, letting him know she saw him, that she understood, that she would wait. As he continued riding toward the distant trail that led back to town, Elias felt something new inside him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the kind that came from surviving a storm, but the kind born from finding a place, a family, and a woman who cared. The desert stretched ahead of him, long and unforgiving, but Elias no longer felt alone. He rode with purpose, with gratitude, and with a quiet promise in his heart. He would return. He wasn't leaving a place behind. He was leaving a future he fully intended to come back to. And far behind him, Maria stepped inside the doorway, touching her fingers to her chest, feeling something warm there, something gentle, something new. She knew he would return, not because he owed her, but because he wanted to.